Modern animism makes the oldest spiritual belief easy for today's seekers to understand, practice, and live. Stay tuned and grow with us. In The Never-Ending Story, Michael N. says there are many different passions as there are people, and I love discovering them here on Fantasia because I think that hearing about other people's courage can help us find our own. Hearing about other people's passions may spark our own. So here with me today is Tigrilla Gardenia. Welcome, Tigrilla.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Me too. We got to start, though, with your name because it's such a unique name. There's got to be a story behind it.
There is. So the synthesis is Tigrilla, it is actually a small South American feline. So I live in a place called Damanhur. It's one of the largest spiritual communities in the world. It's located in northern Italy. And as part of our path, we get to conquer, because it really is, it's a collective process, a new name. The first name is usually an animal or nature spirit. And then the second name is a plant or a fungi. Hence my name, Tigrilla. So it's the super cute, small feline that lives up in the trees.
So did you choose that?
I got lucky. So it's this whole game process. So what happens is when you feel like you really want a name and you feel like you're ready for a name, you go to the popolo, to the people of the community, and you tell them why you want this name. Like, what is this animal or this nature spirit that you want a relationship with? And if they think you're ready, they kind of say, okay. And they give you an offering that ends up going to the temples of humankind. But at the end, once you've collected all of these offerings, you, in the appropriate time, you end up in front of the entire people. So it's usually a collective meeting or some kind of a ritual or event that we're doing, and you present it to the people. And that's where it gets fun, because people start saying, yes, that name is perfect. But others might say, no, I see you more as this animal, or I see you more as this animal. And so it's really a collective, and whatever the community chooses is what gets offered to you. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it's the same name you picked, but honestly, sometimes it's not. And so they offer you this name, and you can always say, no, I want to, let's assume it's a different name. No, I want to wait. And at a later date, I'll come and I'll try again for the name that I want. But most likely, because the whole spirit of it is this transformation, you usually accept what's given to you. Not everybody does, but some of them. I got lucky. I almost was given another name, offered another name, because the popolo was about 50% in one direction. I asked for Tigrilla, but there was 50% of the room that didn't want it. And then some people made some, they said, no, we should give it to her for this reason and for that reason. And these pieces of what she brings and what this animal brings, because you become kind of a representative of this animal. You protect this animal, you become something with this animal. And that sort of swayed people over. And all of a sudden there was a resounding, yeah, let's give it to her. So I got lucky. Not lucky. I earned it.
That's awesome.
Really earned it with blood, sweat, and tears.
That's awesome. I know in lots of cultures they have, initiation rituals where people do get a new name, and it's transformative. Was it that way for you?
Absolutely. I actually waited a long time. I was somebody who, I loved my name. I didn't come there and I didn't expect to want to change it. So for the longest time, I was who I was, and I felt really comfortable with that. And then I don't know, I just got this feeling that it was like, I want to be part of this game. I want to be part of these people. I want to feel like I want to really be in it. And I, found this animal one day, and I knew I kind of wanted to be a cat, or some kind of feline. And when I saw the tigrillo, I was in love. I still am today. Like, I follow 2 or 3, Colombian wildlife refuge, type places that do rewilding of these animals when they're found, because when they're very small, they look like kittens. And so many people try to take them home and then discover that they're not kittens, that they're ferocious felines. And so I love it. Every time I have the opportunity, I feel very, very connected to the growth, plus the relationship that this animal has with the forest. The forest that he lives in is really this beautiful, lush forests that, we're losing in so many different places. And the fact that this animal lives in the trees, lives up on the trees, like likes to have this relationship very close. And so it very much changed. It was a beautiful way to sort of embody all these different aspects of myself that I didn't expect it to be honest.
That's awesome. Now, you are a world ambassador for plants advocacy. That's a mouthful. So what does all that mean?
So this title comes from a few different sources, but basically for over 10 years now, I've been working very closely with plants in a number of different capacities. So I started where I had this chance encounter. The community that I live in is one of the pioneers of what's called plant music, with the music of the plants device. Mm-hmm. And just this random encounter I had. Now you have to understand, my background is in music and in engineering. So I have this music engineering background, and then I've done many different things, circus arts and software and all kinds of different aspects. But plants, at the time, I had pretty strong plant blindness. I didn't really understand, the importance of plants. I wasn't somebody who grew up with a very conscious relationship with plants until I heard this music. And all of a sudden it was like, boom, this a reawakening that happens inside of me and really brings me into this relationship, because it uses a language that I can understand, which is music. Music has always been so close to me, music and dance and movement, things that are nonverbal, even though I love languages of all sorts. So it brings this like love of languages with my connection to music, and this technology focus that I kind of understood sort of gave me an in. It formed a bridge between myself and plants. And so the plant could be like, hey, I'm over here. Like, hi. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa, okay. And that just, I dove in head first, kind of down the rabbit hole of plant intelligence, plant consciousness, plant neurobiology, all the aspects of understanding who this being was. Since I lived in a spiritual community and I was I've been a part of multiple esoteric schools, I had all this kind of spiritual side. I had my music background, so I had all the artistic side that allowed me to sort of step in from a non-conceptual framework, from not having to focus on one thing. And then I had this whole kind of scientific engineering STEM side that allowed me to understand what was happening. And bringing those three together, all of a sudden I realized that I could get out of my own sort of conditioning by stepping deeper into the fact that we're all nature. And from then on, connecting into that aspect of I am nature. Like, I am a being of nature. I participate in nature. I co-create with nature. I am the element that forms nature, like all these different parts. And since then, I have been basically, that's a part of everything I do. So I went through multiple titles, because first I was really focusing on the plant intelligence part. How do I help people understand that plants are these intelligent beings? But then I realized that it's not about that intellectually. It's about the relationship. And so It's about the advocacy of other kin, of the more than human world, of understanding that if we really want to understand ourselves, kind of like I was speaking with a professor the other day who was telling me that, we keep talking about the divine feminine and bringing feminism, all these feminine principles, but we cannot have a truly actualized divine feminine until we have a truly actualized divine male. And it's the same perspective relating to ourselves as individuals, as beings. We can't be fully actualized if we don't accept our animalness and our plantness. And I love working with the plants. And the reason why I advocate so much for these beautiful beings, besides the fact of all that they do for us and all that they are, but it's also the aspect of ourselves that they trigger. They help us get out of this like very restricted, instinctual animal nature that we have, that we've stepped so deep into, right? We focus so much on our movement, we've forgotten our presence. And the understanding that when we tap into that inner plantness, we go back to that stillness and that presence. And patience doesn't become a thing that I have to do. It becomes a part of who I am. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's like advocacy in all different aspects, scientifically and through science communication, but also, energetically and working directly with the plants. And so all these different aspects, in order to remember that we're all the same. I am part plantness. I'm part animal. They have traits that are animal too, because they've evolved also. So there's all these different perspectives. So that's why. That's where the title kind of comes from.
So it's one thing, I think, to recognize the all the things that plants do for us, how wonderful they are, but it's quite a different thing to communicate. How did you find out that communication was possible?
Yeah, that really came. I think it started as a byproduct of the music part, because the music allowed me to get outside of my own head. In other words, like, I think oftentimes when we're trying to get into our instinctual nature and we're trying to understand who we are and communicate, we try to think about it as, I'm communicating with another human. So therefore
Yeah.
I make some sounds, and then I expect sounds to come back, and those sounds get translated in my head and they correspond to some definitions that I have somewhere. The music allowed me to bypass that, because when I heard this music, and what I love about the music of the Plants device in particular, which is slightly different than some of the other Plants devices that are on the market, is that the music of the Plants device was intended to be about communication. Being that it
Mm.
was developed by a spiritual community, by Damanhur, we developed it with the intention of being a way for us to listen in to the plants, in order for us to really be observers of what's happening behind the scenes, of being able to tap into other sides of plants. So the device in and of itself has that function, in the sense that it was the original device was co-created between human and plants. Like, I remember having long conversations with one of the original engineers, and he's like, I didn't know how to do this. I sat there with my plant friends and I asked, guide me. I have some basic electronics. Help me understand this. So when I heard that music, which is very outside of the melodies and rhythms that we all know, it kind of allowed me to let go and to go back to what music really does for me, which is tap into something greater, something deeper. For example, there's a plant kind of behind me. I don't know if you can see this plant that is kind of behind me. I call that, kind of as lovingly called no name Dracaena, has retaught me how to step back into my body, for example, because what the music allowed me to do was kind of trust that I was receiving, just like when I hear a song and I can feel the emotion that the singer puts behind it, or that the writer put behind it. I can feel what the song is supposed to be telling me, regardless of lyrics, right? I don't need lyrics to understand the emotion. And that triggers that relationship between me and songwriter. It was like, okay, this is the same thing. What I am experiencing, because music is something I know, I don't have to know and be able to define what I'm experiencing. I can just trust it. And from there, that allowed me to start to expand into other forms, because then I sort of got to know the way a plant wanted to share with me. What was some of the sort of language points that gave me anchors in things I could trust, so that when I would walk by a plant and all of a sudden a weird thought came into my head, I could say, oh, you're the one that's bringing that. You're the one that's trying to get my attention here. Because even though now it's not music, but I get that same feeling as I do when it's with the music. And from there, I was able to slowly expand out and realize that, in part, I am a verbal person. I like to talk. So therefore, the fact that there's running conversations going through my head, that I'm sort of more clairaudient, is not my mind chatter. It is my way of receiving. It's like a receiver. And what I had to do was learn how to tune it. And sometimes I'm going to tune it through music. Sometimes it's going to be words. I'm going to sit, with a tree, Gary the silver fir, in front of my house, and I can sit there and I can hear words that pop up. They're not in the language that I'm expecting, and I often take a while before I can bring them into some kind of order, but I know that that's where it's coming from. And from there, it's just been expanding, all trying different mechanisms in order to be able to communicate.
So we're talking about the Singing Plants of Damanhur. I'm following you, but there may be people who don't have any idea what either one of those things are. So can we back up and tell us about Damanhur?
Yeah, so Damanhur is this amazing community where our what we call our first city, or like our main area, is in northern Italy. We're in the foothills of the Alps in northern Italy, but we're an esoteric society and a community. It's kind of like, I call this Hogwarts for adults. What is it like when you live your spirituality 24/7? So therefore we live in shared homes, we live in community, and there's also initiates all around the world. We have an entire initiatic path. I mean, we've been around for this is our 50th year, like structured year, since the community was founded here. Few years before this in Turin, while, everything was sort of getting started. And here every aspect of life kind of takes that. What is it that we're doing in order to help reawaken humanity, right? That's our overall mission. And sometimes that's done by just living, right? The fact that we live together, we share experiences, we're evolving together, because in nature, we know that, when you do things with others, that's when you evolve the fastest. We also carry out certain types of missions for humanity. We have what's considered the largest, or how do I say it? The eighth wonder of the world, or the first wonder of the new world, which is the temples of humankind. And these are underground cathedrals that we built into the mountain completely by hand. So it's an entire society, it's an entire school, it's an entire group of friends that all live together, and uncles and cousins and all kinds of different things on this initiatic path with a common mission of the reawakening of humanity.
And how did the singing plants become a part of this?
Yeah, so in the late 1970s, as part of the path, came this whole concept of we were doing a lot of paranormal studies at that time, and that's always been sort of an underlying piece of everything that we do. And as part of those paranormal studies, it was really trying to understand other beings, right? We have divinities, and we have, plants and animals and all kinds of different aspects. And there was a group of people who liked electronics, and we thought, well, what happens if we try to connect a plant, because plants have electrical signals just the same as we as humans do, right? Mm-hmm. They have these these action potentials that fire within their bodies. And so we said, well, what if we try to read those? That was kind of the original idea. And could we tap into the thought process of plants, to what plants are experiencing? And we tried a lot of different experiments in about 1978 was when we actually started. So long time ago now. And the idea was, how do we try different things? Like, for example, if I connect a plant to a door, what will happen? Like, who will the plant open the door for? And so we found that the plant would open the lock, like a little mechanism for humans that they knew, or animals that they knew, that they had a relationship with. And so we started expanding from there. And one of the thoughts was, well, if plants are creating these frequencies, right, with these electrical frequencies, what happens if we make that into something auditory? The first sound was horrible because it was like raw sounds. It was like, it was really ugly. But then we thought, oh, what if we used MIDI and we turned those into notes of music? So that's where the music of the plants was born. The original concept of it was the idea of us listening in. Right? We'll tap into you. You go about, do your thing. We're going to listen to see what we learn and how we can relate. The interesting part is that anytime you have music, if you're a musician, you know this. If you hear music, I had friends of mine that would do this in the gym. They would hear weights that touch together, and they would try to make a rhythm out of it. So of course, every time that people would hear this music, musicians will pull out a guitar and try to play along, thinking, again, I'm playing along to something that the plant is experiencing. But what we discovered was that the plant started to change the music in order to harmonize back with the human. And that's where we realized, oh my goodness, this is a two-way conversation. This is before, at least in our little world of Italy back then, it wasn't like people knew about the secret life of plants or knew what was kind of starting to come down the pipe. I mean, it's the late 70s, early 80s by this point. And so we developed it into a device that was this sort of crude way of being able to hear these notes of music and to start to interact with the plants and to see what would happen. So we discovered many different things, like plants would learn how to use the device and then could harmonize more with the humans. So we had the first plant concerts that happened. We started to eventually test things like healing, because you have sound healing and you have the fact that plants are healers naturally. So you get this sort of extra piece to it. So I did some research into the effects of plant music on human health. And we've had people that have developed this in many different ways of communication, which is a big thing of how I use it. Like when I work with a plant, even today, I still sometimes will connect the plant to the music of the plants to be able to feel things or to go beyond the paradigm, to go into realms, especially for me at this point, since I communicate pretty regularly on the normal stuff, but especially when I want to go into realms that are not yet seen, or I don't yet understand, or can't really picture them, to shift that paradigm, to get deeper into a land or an area, to understand what the plant has experienced. That's where, for me personally, the music of the plants is amazing. But I know so many people now that are using this device and working with plants, like I said, for healing. They're working for understanding better the relationship with certain aspects of the plant, for activating locations. It's amazing.
So, what's one of the most surprising or profound things that a plant has taught you?
Wow. I would say that for me, probably the most profound is a few different. Well, let me go for two. Two. I'll try to be brief about it. But one of them is the fact of understanding new ways of interacting and working with myself. In other words, many of the belief systems that we have around. Actually, I'll say it in this way. Let me find it this way. As my work with the plants has allowed me to understand that my dominant personality is actually a critic, and that critic is good. In other words, I grew up thinking that my critic was destructive. I was, a woman, strong woman, enters into the business world, starts to criticize things, and, gets told, you're just disruptive. You're somebody who just tries to break everything down. You're presumptuous, and all these things. And you start to believe that critic, not the inner critic, not the I'm a bad person, but critic is in, I see this report and I can see that right here, there's a hole and this doesn't work. And I can see the criticality or the critical points in a project or something like that. Just as a small example, I really believed that was something that was negative. It was a trait for me to get rid of, this belief system that we have these traits and that we're supposed to get rid of them. And why working through with the plants and spending a lot of time with plants, I started to understand that in ecosystems, everything is useful. Yeah. And the plants helped me understand that it's not the critic that is a problem. It was the way I was using the critic. The amount of the critic I was using, like the weight, how much weight I was giving it, the mechanism, how I was applying the critic, and when I was relying on the critic to speak. In other words, I started to look at everything as an overall ecosystem, starting with the idea that everything is useful if I learn how to use it. And that has probably been the number one thing that plants have taught me that has transformed my life as well as the life of my clients, because it goes in a completely different direction of something is wrong with me. I need to change this. I need to eliminate. And it changes even our entire relationship with the whole idea of the shadow self. The shadow self is not the negative things you hide in a corner and they're bad and you should get rid of them. They become these are the things I don't know how to use. These are the things I'm putting into, or the parts of me that are disruptive and are destructive, but that's positive because I need to break things down in order to build them back up. So really stepping deeper into the fact of, if I am an ecosystem myself, and as an ecosystem myself, I interact with ecosystems on a regular basis, that means everything we are is useful. And even that person in the corner that just said something ridiculous has its purpose. And that ridiculousness could fit. Where is it that ridiculousness fits? So it helped me kind of get out of this human conditioning, to step out of all of the constraints that humanity, that society has put inside of me, and to come back into myself with this belief system that everything is useful. I have to just learn how to use it. I have to learn how much. I have to learn where, and I have to learn how to apply it. And I can change constantly.
So when you're talking about plant teachers, in some communities, plant teachers are referring to psychedelics.
Right.
That's not what you're saying.
Not at all. Actually, have never the only time I've ever been well, that's not true. I've been in the presence of psychedelics all the time, but I even remember one time when a group of friends of mine were doing ayahuasca and I was sitting in the corner, and the shaman, who I was the only person that could speak directly with the shaman language wise, kept saying to me, "Are you going to drink?" And I was like, "Nope." I'm like, I don't need to. Like the relationship comes through a different channel for me. I don't have any problem with it if that's your path, but it's not something I need, because every plant can be a master teacher when you create that relationship. And sometimes it's a species, but oftentimes it's not even the species. The rosemary in your house, or Noel the Christmas cactus, who's my business partner right now, each one of these plants, sure, have universal principles that you can connect into, which many people do. But also, once we form a relationship, it's kind of like if you and I, as humans, were forming a relationship, I could learn so much from you that is not the things that you teach as a profession. As a profession, you teach certain things, but in our relationship, you trigger things inside of me. You pull things inside of me. You make me think about things. And so I can learn so much from you. And I find it's the exact same thing with plants. Sure, as a species, if I, take rosemary, I get these characteristics. Or if I work with dandelion, I get these other characteristics. But if I have this one dandelion plant that I go and I visit on a regular basis, that dandelion has an entire set of experiences based on where that dandelion grew up, on the experiences of all the generations of dandelion before, of the land itself being able to share. And so therefore, I'm going to get a whole different form of relationship. And so for me, I don't kind of, again, I've never well, actually, that's not true. As an initiate, we don't do psychedelics anyway. But even before that, it doesn't call to me. I like the relationship coming from a different place for me personally.
So, do all plants want a relationship, or how do you know who's open to that?
In my experience, not all plants
Yeah.
want a relationship. And I think
Yeah.
that that's another aspect of this that happens, which is that I think we want to impose our relationship, and it's not like that. It's about asking. It's about conversation. It's about creating a relationship. And sometimes even a plant, like for example, I mentioned earlier, Noel, the Christmas cactus, who is my business partner. Noel and I have only started to work in the last few months, because prior to that, I was working with spider plant, capital S spider, lowercase p plant. That's the plant's name. Like that's the name spider plant always wanted to be called by. And spider plant and I built much of my business working very closely with this plant. I designed entire, healing protocols and music healing. I worked through COVID with this plant. This was my business partner. Like I had so much respect and love for this plant. And then at some point over the last second half of last year, Spider Plant said to me, "You do realize I'm about to go on sabbatical." And I was like, "What do you mean?" It was like, "I'm just preparing you. I'm not going to be here for very much longer." Not just in like as a plant, spider plant still exists, but spider plant was I'm going to reduce my size. I'm going into hibernation. I need to do something different with my life. And you need something different for your business. And then a few months after that, I got the Noel is going to be the plant. And I just kept staring at Noel going, "No, you're not." Like Noel and I do not have that relationship. Noel is not a chitty chatty kind of plant. And it wasn't until around the end of the year and the beginning of this new year that all of a sudden I realized that it's exactly the fact where Spider Plant and I talked. That was how we had built our relationship. We had built our relationship through a communication that was pretty much verbal or music based. Those were the two ways that we would talk and we would experience. And I built programs with Spider Plant. I worked on, modalities with Spider Plant. Noel is very different. Noel is teaching me to go outside of paradigms that I don't yet even understand. Noel doesn't talk to me. I don't sit there with Noel and take notes. I feel a presence, and sometimes I feel a tap on my shoulder that says, "Stop and just receive what I want to give you." And then it'll come in over time. It's a very, very different relationship. So even with plants that we do work with for a long period of time, it's not a given that they want to keep working with you. It could be a time where you outgrow each other or you need different things. So it's extremely important to always do that check-in. Like, what are we here to do? Why are we working together? And do we want to continue, or do I need something else? In other words, Spider Plant needed something completely different. The healing that Spider Plant started to do from COVID on was taxing, was very taxing. And at some point, Spider Plant said, "I don't want to do this anymore. I need rest. I need to go into myself." And as much as I didn't want to, I wasn't ready. But I understand, it took me a long, and it was a long process to get there. Like it probably was a process of around 6 months
Hmm.
from the first time Spider Plant mentioned this to me and started to change their physical body, to me understanding what Noelle was here to bring me. It's been this journey that's passed through.
I'm glad that you said it's not verbal, that they're not talking to you, that the communication is different, because I think a lot of people expect it to be just like I'm talking to you. And it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be very straightforward, go down the street, turn left, wear the red dress. It's not that at all.
No, no. And sometimes it comes in really unusual ways. Like I said, no name Dracaena. I was working on a research project with a group of people, and each one of us were working with a plant to develop something different. And I, started to work with Dracaena on this, but Dracaena made it very clear, like, Dracaena was like, I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to give you a name because I don't want you to talk to me. You need to start using your body. You need to start moving your body. And at first I thought, oh, okay, well, let me connect to the music of the plants. And I did that once. And then Dracaena was like, no, that's not it either. You need to listen with your body. And I have done very odd things with this, with this plant, from dancing around my house to, different forms of meditation, of movement of body, to drawing in unusual ways like that use my body to try to get in tune with these aspects of it. And that's just one plant that's done this. Like I said, like no name Dracaena, I know it's a business thing, and I know it's paradigm shifting, and I know it's not words, but it's not exactly images. It's not exactly anything that I understand.
Mm.
And that makes sense. Plants have
Mhm.
multiple senses that we don't have, right?
Yeah.
At least 15 other senses that we don't have. So it makes sense. As a matter of fact, since we started working together, organically speaking, all of a sudden I've stepped much deeper into mysticism, the idea of that presence in nature and to receive. And I have had multiple mystics come into my life to kind of reinforce the fact that the new path for me is presence wise. It's letting, with Dracaena, it was about starting to get in touch with my body, almost like, what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like training my body to become a receptor, right? I am receptor and I am sensor, as Natasha Myers would say. And to get back into dance and fluidity and flow through the physical body. And now Dracaena is like, great, now that you're there, now I can step in because that's how I can communicate with you. You're going to feel my impact. And I point in this direction because that's where, Noelle, the Christmas cactus is. And I feel an impact, like waves sometimes that hit me, as almost like a transmission that hits my body. And I just sit here stunned because you want to bring it to words immediately, right? You want to be able to express it, but you know that that's not how it's going to be. And so then all of a sudden I start to see it seep into things. I start to see that my notes change, and something I thought I understood in one way, all of a sudden I don't understand it in that way. And I start to understand other layers of it. And it's like, oh, okay, that's what's happening. Like you're showing me a different layer to something that I thought I knew or that I had a vision for. And now all of a sudden something else is being unveiled. And I realized that that's really what Noelle does. Noelle helps me understand things that I already understand at a deeper, at a more expansive, at a new level, and with new parameters that maybe I would have never put in there myself.
So it sounds like you have a lifestyle that incorporates all of this. What is it like when you go outside of your community and you're in mainstream society?
Yeah, I kind of don't care. Like, to be really honest, I am one of those people that is so comfortable with who I am and with how I do things. It's taken a long time, by the way. It's taken me like a journey of, probably 40 years of this. And I just am. Like, if you don't like, let me say it this way. I am pretty good, as part of what my deep pattern is, of bridging, of being able to put this into words that you might understand. So if I was just speaking earlier to an artist that works with with plants in a very creative, artistic way. And so I was able to talk to her in this way. Then I was with a group of people that are very esoteric, and I was able to flip, the words. So my training with Kabbalah communications and my own deep pattern of being this bridge, I do modify my words a little bit, or the type of language I might use, but I don't change the essence of it. I just sort of slightly give it a different color, just to make sure, just to help express it differently. And I do realize that over the years, it's become less and less about the words and more about the presence. And I think this is my personal experience. I find that if you really are something, regardless of what it is, when it's really yours, something that's deep inside of you that emanates from you, people just trust it. They don't have to understand it. They don't have to. I think when you put too many words to it, that's when we start to lose people, because then I'm trying to convince you. I don't need to convince you. I want to share with you what I'm experiencing. And for some of you, I'm going to wave my hands a lot. And for others of you, maybe I'll use words. For some, I might talk in colors, but I don't need to convince you. I want to just share with you what I'm experiencing. And if you're closed off to that, then I don't need to share it with you either. Hopefully my presence will do something, kind of like, and that really was something, probably another lesson from the plants. Their silent ability to just be, as a person who has been a chattermouth all her life, has taught me a lot about, wow, sometimes I don't need to speak. I just need to be in it and let somebody else ask me, and let somebody else, just let them be in the energy, and maybe they'll start to change too.
That's kind of what I meant. I was talking more like, you're at the grocery store, you're at the Wawa, you're at the Kroger's, you're at the gas station, and you're with all these people who are not particularly mindful, not particularly spiritual or present, and they're not even really communicating with themselves because they have all this mental chatter going on. Is that different?
Yeah. It is. I mean, for sure that there's a part of it, like you can't go into the kind of conversations you and I are going into when you have people like that in front of you. And I recognize that. And of course, there is an aspect of that you're, to be honest, it's a little bit sad for me, because it's like, oh my goodness, if we could only, because I see what the person has deep inside of them. I can see that it's there. And it's like, wow, your conditioning is so strong that you're missing out on something so beautiful within you, and, and expressing. I do think that there's a bit of so for me, like I said, I don't hide it. So for example, I have been known to, be standing at a grocery store and walk out and see a plant growing from a sidewalk crack and get a message, and like literally like put my bags down on the ground and sit there for a second and be like, what's going on here? Or I have no qualms whatsoever with like pushing people out of the way if they're about to step on a plant unconsciously without thinking about it. Like, I don't have any qualms about that. I think another gift from the plants, going back to the fact that my primary, my dominant personality is a critic, which can be a little judgmental. Like, it has the capability of being judgmental. And so part of this work with the plants has been to understand that I can turn judgment into discernment, and that my judgment can be on a situation, but not on a person. Mm-hmm. And I can meet the person where they are. And so therefore I could push you out of the way so you don't trust a plant. And then the person's like, what the hell did you just do? And I'm like, look how cute. Why would you want to step on that? Rather than saying, look what you were about to step on because you're you're not awake and blah, blah, blah. So I think it has helped for me to still be true to self and authentic, mm-hmm. and find playful ways to express it without losing the essence of it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's been a big piece.
So when you're out somewhere, like you just said, I'm coming out of the grocery store, I'm hearing this plant communicating. What would prompt a plant to sing or to communicate? Do they have to be happy? Do they have to be, I don't know, or are they doing it all the time?
I really think plants, just the same as we do, I think plants have, their own inner lives that are experiencing. This is, of course, an area of much debate. I do a plant consciousness commentary live stream every Friday, and we are talking so much about the inner life of plants, because the scientific world struggles with thinking that plants are aware of themselves and all these different, but that's a whole other piece that we can talk about at some point. I do find that I've experienced all kinds of plants. I've experienced those that are completely silent and, don't feel the need to interact in some ways. I have had others that are super chattery, that are like, just waiting for somebody who's going to listen. And so they bring it in. So I do think that there's a wide range. And I especially think that there are many plants out there, at least in my experience, that are waiting to be brought into the conversation, that want to interact with humans, that want to have a different type of relationship. I kind of think of it a little bit as they're holding space. They're creating space in some ways. And so therefore they're holding space, can hold this space for humanity and for animals and for everything all along. And at the same time, there's an entire grouping of them that want to partner. They want to go beyond that themselves. And so when I'm out and about, and I have to say this, all of this is experimentation and even readaptation constantly, even for myself as a human. I've had to redefine clothing, food, stepping on grass, right? I went through a long period at the very beginning of my journey where I could not walk on grass comfortably. Like, am I supposed to kill the grass? Does it kill the grass? Is it okay to create a path here? Like, I went through this entire path, a period of time where I was like, I erred on the side of caution, which was probably extreme, but it was what I needed to feel that sort of void on the other side, or to look at it with utmost reverence, and then consciously bring the plants back into it. Is like, wait a minute, I'm thinking of you like a human, where of course, if I got stepped on every day, that would be horrible, but you're different. So what does that mean? And sitting on the grass and asking, in different places, in different countries, and different types, the grass on, the sidewalk, or the grass that's in my lawn, or the grass that's in this or in these other pieces, and trying to rebuild a relationship that probably hasn't existed in 200,000 years type of thing. So I do think that there are plants that want to communicate. I think everybody kind of goes back to that. Everybody has their function. Some are happily carrying out their function isolated, and they have no desire to necessarily interact with us other than a hi, bye, I'm going to be polite type of thing. And there are others that instead are like, I'm so glad that you're here and you're listening. I have so much I want to tell you. And I think part of this process is also us not being so I struggle sometimes with people who are like, I'm going to go and hug a tree. And I'm like, can you ask the tree if the tree wants to be hugged? Because I have definitely met trees that have said, please don't touch me.
Same.
Please don't touch me. And so I think that process of honoring the wishes of the plant is so important. And again, it's all about relationships. And from a Damanhurian philosophy, we believe that there's a number of what we call missing archetypes, right? We have all these different kinds of archetypes out in the world that are what helps us make up the constraints of what is our world, right? What our world is made up of, all these archetypes. We believe there's about 20 archetypes that are actually connected to relationships that are missing. And the ones that hold them are the plants. And so I have spent a long time trying to understand some of the relationships that plants have that we don't consider, like commensalisms, right? I am taking from somebody, right? But that person doesn't really care. So I'm getting an advantage and the person's not being affected at all. It's something that in our world today, we think of it as mooching, right? We think of it as, and yet in a natural setting, an ecosystem, it's a perfectly natural type of relationship that exists. Just the same as competition has its place. And it's not all based on mutualisms, right? There's predation and there's parasitism. There's all kinds of different relationships, and probably more that we don't even understand because they're outside of our realm. And so I think that that's kind of when I try to approach a plant, I try to think about it like, what kind of relationship am I supposed to have? And in some cases, I don't know, because I'm still don't understand. So I have a plant that's maybe silent. Like I'm looking at a plant that's sitting on my windowsill, a plant that has been living with me for a long time. And I kind of don't have a relationship with that plant. I don't think anything is wrong. I just don't think we have a relationship other than I water you and I ensure that you're living okay. And I don't know if a relationship, just like with Noelle, is going to develop over time. But I feel like right now, I'm not in a place to understand whatever type of relationship. So right now, it's like nobody is affecting anybody. Like we're just there. We're in everybody's presence. That's it.
And how does your relationship with plants impact your use of herbs for food or for plants as medicine? Do you do that?
I do. I don't. I do in general, but I think it's no different for me, and that's probably the part that is
Okay.
different for others. Is that it's no different to me than my clothing or my furniture, and the fact that plants gave their lives for that.
Mm.
So, or the fact it's also changed my relationship with animals relating to food. Like oftentimes people think I'm supposed, I'm vegan or something, and I'm like, why would I be vegan when I have to take the life of a plant in order to eat a plant? So
Yeah.
therefore, I'm more of an intuitivore. I believe heavily that the most important thing is the relationship you
Hmm.
have.
Hmm.
Hence why living in community, at least when I'm home, I have the advantage of knowing how my plants and my animals have been, raised and how they have died and being a part of that cycle of life. So yes, I use plants in all kinds of things. I love cooking. I'm a big foodie. I'm a Taurus. I love food. And I definitely love things with lots of flavor. So I use a lot of plants. And I'm very conscious of the fact that plants in all of my food, just the same as I'm conscious that animals have given their lives in order for me to
Yeah.
eat. So I think here's this interesting thing that another one of those side things that it took me years to realize that had changed in me is I actually realized I was eating less,
Mm.
not because I was holding myself back, but because I was more satiated.
Mm.
Because I think that understanding and giving reverence to and gratitude to the fact that these herbs and these plants, and the same thing with, herbs for medicine and things like that. I feel like that act of recognition that you are giving of yourself to me, and of also being much more in tuned with your body, because you get into these natural cycles and you step into a different flow and a different relationship. Even when I travel, I realize this because my cycles change depending on the location where I am and all these different pieces. I naturally get sick less.
Mm.
And we notice this in Damanhur from various experiments that we've tried and living in the woods and other kinds of things. You naturally get sick less and you naturally eat less, or you eat better. You eat more in connection with your body. I'm Cuban American, man. I love sugar. Sugar and I get along very, very well. And yet I eat a lot less of it, not again because I'm trying to hold myself back, but because I feel more in tune with it. So it takes less. And also I want to respect the life of who gave their life to me. So I purchase things in a different way. Whether I waste less clothing, I hold on to things for a longer period of time. And it's not a conscious, I must be sustainable. It is the ultimate respect and reciprocal relationship that gets created. So like you said earlier, it's a lifestyle. It starts to, if you allow yourself, it starts to change everything around you, because you realize that if I'm going to respect you, then all of those things have to change. I can't eat like a gullard and eat everything. I can't buy furniture or fast clothing
Mhm.
and still say I respect plants. I cannot call myself somebody who's in relationship with plants and then go down and buy myself, 17 t-shirts that I wear 4 times and then throw them away. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that that's probably where my life has changed. And when I'm outside of the home, I'm even more conscious that that's probably the bigger differences. It's not about like sitting and hearing a plant that spoke to me as I walked by and having a conversation, but it's about, those elements and asking questions like, well, industrial agriculture is not just bad because of bees, but does a plant really want to grow in a monoculture? Like,
Yeah.
is that really fair to them? And so do I want to support buying that monoculture because that encourages people? And so
Right.
it starts opening all these types of questions out of pure respect and love.
Do you think that humans ever had collectively had this awareness of our relationship with plants? And if so, how did we lose it? Any ideas?
This is a great question that I have gone through that I think about often. So in Damanhur, we see, how do I explain this? Let me try to think about the short way of I want to explain this. So in a very quick, trying to be synthetic perspective. So the Damanhurian philosophy of the reawakening of humanity, right, is the fact that we at one point had the human world, which is the animal world, really. It's the animal world of which humans are a part of, the plant world and the world of nature spirits, all combined together, right? So at one point we were all one. It's the famous "we are one," right? That comes from also the idea of this primeval divinity that comes into the world of form. Okay, so I come into the world of form, and why? I guess the question you have to ask yourself first is, why are we in this existence, right? The whole famous question of why are we here type of perspective. So if you believe, you mentioned a quote from the Never-Ending Story at the very beginning, okay, which is one of my favorites. In the Never-Ending Story, if you remember, you have the nothing, right? The nothing is really actually the everything, the no thing.
Yeah.
Everything is actually there, but everything is there at a certain level of understanding, a certain level of complexity, a certain level of knowledge and of wisdom and of everything. It's all there, but it's all also stagnant there. It can't really expand because it is everything. So there is no expansion of it because it is everything. Hence why Atreyu and Bastian has to go through this entire journey in order to recognize that the nothing is there. And then upon that wish, to start to wish in a new level. Does that make sense so far?
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay. So in that perspective, I really believe that we were all together at one level. And that level was beautiful and fantastic. And we probably could have stayed there. But it was also stagnant. Not stagnant because anything is wrong, stagnant because it is everything. And therefore, everything doesn't grow and expand. But in the universe, the natural tendency is to want to evolve. So evolution requires a shattering of that nothing into tons of pieces that can be reconfigured in lots of different ways, with the hope that that reconfiguration of the pieces will lead to an evolution to something different. So I really believe that the journey that we're on is about, yes, we were once one. We were shattered out because we wanted to grow. And therefore, everything that we're looking at is not, yes, a loss on some aspects, but more than anything, it's we need to reacquire it in a new way. We need to bring it together with our own awareness. Because also, when we bring it together with awareness, with consciousness, nobody can take it away from you because now you've earned it. So I really believe that some of it was lost. We've had little cycles where we've lost things because they were given to us. And when you're given to you, you don't understand them. And therefore, you can't really embody them. It's easy for them to be taken away. Instead, if we look at it as every one of those has been a test to understand, can we create new configurations that allow us with the same parts to expand them to a whole new level? And I think that that's really the journey that we're on. We're on a journey of expansion. We're on a journey of evolution. We're on a journey to create new paradigms, to learn how to think and be protagonist in this world of form together with others, because that's what's going to get us to the next level.
So tell us how to access your coaching and your course on plant communication.
Yeah, so I have, there's obviously you can just find, my name is pretty unusual, Tigrilla Gardenia. So if you just look for my name, you're going to find me. I also have an entire community, an online community called the Naturally Conscious Community that is dedicated to human plant relationship. It's all about everything we've just talked about and expanding who you are based on these relationships. In there, I have multiple levels and multiple memberships. I have a whole free section that has all kinds of great events, but I also have then memberships that have my book club, my teachings. So my arts and creativity group, because our writing and creativity group is a really great way to also, again, expand and think beyond. And so all of it can be found from my website. So you just go to tigrillagardenia.com And you can also find it at naturallyconsciouscommunity.com.
Awesome. I have so many more questions and we're out of time. I mean, I could just sit here and just talk and talk and talk. But I really appreciate you being here and sharing yourself. And if everybody's listening, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you all next week.
Bye.